I want to start out a little differently this morning, and I need your help. I need your participation for the opening of my devotional time. Up on the screen, we have a picture of our beloved 39th president, President Jimmy Carter, who served in office from 1977 to 1981. Now, I will tell you that I was ages 6 to 10 during the Carter administration. So the first part of his administration, I barely remember anything, but I do remember quite a bit as I reached that 8, 9, 10 years old range. But here's where I need your help. And interestingly enough, you all were probably around the same age then as I am today under President Obama. So obviously you remember way more than I will. But just thinking back on those 4 years in office, when you think back on President Carter's presidency, his administration, what comes to mind during those 4 years?
We had hostages
Yes.
during that period of time.
Yes. Very good, Brother Larry. If you recall, we had the Iranian hostage crisis in 1979 going into 1980. In fact, and also connected with that, we had the failed military rescue attempt by our special forces. And I would dare say that those two events combined probably led to his departure from office and Ronald Reagan winning the presidency in November of 1980. So those were two big events that happened in 1979, 1980. Any other thoughts about what was going on during that time? Yes, ma'am.
Interest rates were high, weren't they?
Yes, they were. Another thing that was going on during this time, if you recall, there was an energy crisis and there were fuel shortages primarily based on the policies of the administration. They were trying to reduce our need for foreign oil, and it kind of backfired and we ended up with gas lines and all of that stuff. We also had, as you mentioned, we were in a struggling economy with rising inflation and interest prices. Homes during that time were skyrocketing. And if you didn't get in time, your mortgage rate was pretty substantial. If you might recall, in the 1980 Summer Olympics were to be held in Moscow, and we ended up boycotting the Olympics in 1980. Also, we had the United States' worst nuclear disaster in our own history, 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. So those are just some of the big events that took place during the Carter administration. And unfortunately for him, what this led to was a failed presidential legacy. He kind of left office between his legs. He got pounded by Ronald Reagan in that November 1980 election. If I recall, I think he only won maybe 2 states. I know it was an incredible landslide. But interestingly enough, he may have left office defeated, but he began to create a new legacy once he left office. So now when you think of former President Carter, once he left office in January of 1981, all the way up to today, 32 years later in 2013, when you think back on Jimmy Carter for the last 32 years, now what do you think of when you hear the name Jimmy Carter? Yes. Habitat for Humanity, very good. That's the first thing that I thought of as well. One of the first organizations that he joined up with once he left office was Habitat for Humanity. And he has done amazing work both for them and for himself in rebuilding his own personal legacy. Very good. Any other thoughts on the legacy that President Carter has today? Joe? Yes, very good. Connected with that is the Carter Center, which he and his wife Rosalind founded. And you see at the bottom of the screen, their mission is waging peace, fighting disease, and building hope. So he's been very active over the last 32 years in his diplomatic efforts. Good insight, Joe. Any other thoughts on the legacy of President Carter over the last 30 years? related to his diplomatic efforts. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in the year 2002. So I would dare say that, the amazing thing about President Carter, yes, he had a failed presidency, but he's actually been an amazing former president if you think back over the last 32 years. He's done an amazing job of rebuilding that failed legacy and making an outstanding legacy. And I've been thinking a lot about this idea of legacy and legacy building, primarily due to the fact of this man. This is my Uncle Bob, and he passed away this past June. And unfortunately, in today's terms, a relatively young man. He was only 79 years old. He had been battling prostate cancer for the last 6 to 8 years, and unfortunately it moved into his bones, and then he only had about a year or two left, and then he died suddenly in mid-June. I feel fortunate in that I was able to attend his memorial service back in early July. And while I was sitting there in the memorial service, I heard my family members recall his life. I heard his friends speak about the amazing things that he did for his family and his friends. And I heard remarks such as, Bob Jones was a kind and compassionate and caring man. The words that came out of his mouth, he spoke encouraging words, and this was just a great man, and he demonstrated his faith through what he did. And as I sat in that memorial service, I was reminded of the amazing legacy that my uncle did leave. And so today I just want to talk about 3 ways that all of us can leave an amazing legacy of love to those we leave behind. And the first way is through what we say, the words that come out of our mouth. In Proverbs 15, verses 1, 2, and 4, we read this: a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise adorns knowledge, but the mouth of the fool gushes folly. The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. All of us have probably heard this saying and even said it ourselves maybe as kids. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but names can never hurt me. Now all of us know this is totally and utterly false. In fact, I would dare say that many professional counselors probably see people as a result of verbal abuse more than they do physical abuse, because people's words have a tremendous impact on our lives. As I mentioned, my uncle, when people recounted his life, they talked about the words that came out of his mouth, but the remark was he was a man of very few words. Interesting thing, though, is he chose his words wisely, and when he did choose to speak, that people listened to what he had to say. And the great thing about my Uncle Bob was he spoke words of encouragement to his family and to his friends. Amen. And all of us need to remember and be reminded from time to time that our words do have an impact on our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. And I will admit that I haven't always been the best son, unfortunately, and I forget to get in contact with my own parents. 3 or 4 weeks will go by and I'll have the thought, oh, I haven't talked to my parents, I need to call them. And when I do end up calling them and they pick up the phone, and I can tell they're glad to hear from me, but at the same time, I can tell there's some disappointment that I've waited so long to call them. And so my remark is, well, Mom and Dad, you can pick up the phone and call me too. And their concern is, well, we know you're so busy. You know what? We all have to be, as children or as parents, as grandparents, we all have to be proactive in staying in touch with one another. So we all need to remember we can just pick up the phone and we can be in touch with our family members. So be proactive and staying in contact with those that you love. Also related to this is writing down your legacy, writing down things that are happening in your own family. One of the regrets that I have in my part of the Jones family is that my family has been horrible at record keeping. The only real things that I know about my side of the Jones family are things that have been handed down to me orally. No one has taken the time really to compile good notes or journals, pictures. We really don't have that much on my side of the Jones family. And myself and my brothers, we're trying to change this where we're writing more things down for future generations. So I just encourage you, if you've never thought of that before, to write stuff down for your family. They will be so grateful. They may not be grateful today, but later on as they get older, they will be so grateful that you took the time and the energy to write down that information for them, to leave a legacy of love to your family. Related to this as well is we live in a really awesome time in history where we have things recorded down. We have videotapes and DVDs and audio recordings. Anything that has you in it, you should put off to the side in a special place, and you should let your family members know about it. Compile all that information so that they can look back on your life. Again, because my family has been so bad at record keeping, I know very little about even my own grandfathers. I knew my two grandmothers, but I never knew my grandfathers, and I wish that I had more pictures. I wish I had maybe an audio recording or a video recording of them. I really know nothing about them. Maybe even my great-grandparents, I really don't know that much information. Well, we live in a time in history where we can put all of these things together for future generations. So it's something to think about as well as we're leaving a legacy in the words that we say or write down. The second way we leave an amazing legacy of love is through what we do, our actions. 1 John 3:17 and 18 says this: if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. When I look back at my uncle's life, I had mentioned that he was a man of very few words. But the awesome thing is he let his actions speak of his faith. He was more of a doer, which is probably typical of your generation. Y'all don't like to talk about stuff. You like to do something about what's happening. So my uncle was a doer. He let his actions speak of his faith. And I think we all know that and we understand that. There's the saying that go, actions speak louder than words. And we all recognize that. There's another saying that says this: talk is cheap, action is what truly counts. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this second point because I think we all recognize that. But just think about, as you live your life, as you go about your daily activities, just remember that we demonstrate our love to our family and to our friends through our actions. Talk is cheap. So remember to leave an awesome legacy through your actions. Finally, the third way we can leave an amazing legacy is through what we give, giving back to others. Proverbs 13:22 says this: a good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. When I think of my uncle's life, I think of someone who gave sacrificially back to others. He gave of his time, his talent, and his treasure. You know, when you think about giving up your time, time is a very precious resource. You know, you can always go out and earn more money, make more money, but time, we only have a set amount of time. And so we need to be wise in how we spend our time and invest that time in those that we love and care about, those we're trying to leave a legacy to. Also, in the area of talents, my uncle was a plumber by trade. And he was a handyman. He could fix just about anything. I remember hearing my family recall how he used to take my two cousins out to his garage to work on their car, and he would show my two cousins how to fix their cars. So he was very handy. Now, he just didn't use that talent that he had to fix things for himself, but at his church, because his church had a very small staff, when something broke down at the church, he would, as soon as he found out about it, he'd grab his toolbox and he'd run down to the church to fix whatever needed to be fixed. He used his talents and abilities to invest into God's kingdom through his church. Finally, his treasurer, I know that he probably spent thousands and thousands of dollars in helping others, helping his family and friends. When I think back on my uncle's life, he was a caregiver. He loved other people, and he loved taking care of other people. He took care of other aunts and uncles and other family members, because that's just the kind of person that he was. So those are the three ways that we can give back: time, talent, and treasure. And then in a final area that we need to think about in our giving is our planned giving, our legacy documents. I'm assuming that all of us have taken care of all of those legal documents for the end of our life. Our wills, living trusts, power of attorney, all of those important things that we need to take care of. But I always hate to assume things, so I'd like to remind all of us that we need to have those documents in place. Also, if it's been a while since you've done those documents, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, it may be time to go back and double check those documents to make sure that they're up to date for 2013. So again, something to think about, our planned giving for when we pass away. As I read in Proverbs 13:22, it is biblical to leave an inheritance to your children and to your children's children. So that's something you want to think about as you plan out your financial legacy, your financial gifts to those you leave behind. So we have our earthly family, our children, our grandchildren, maybe even great-grandchildren. But also we have a spiritual family. We have the family of God right here at First Baptist Raytown. So when I think of my spiritual family, I think of our congregation. And even though I'm a staff member, you all as a congregation have taught me, have spoken into my life. And as a result, I want to give back to my spiritual family as well. So I'd like you to consider that, if you've never considered it before, to give back, to leave a legacy to your church body here at First Baptist Raytown. I don't know if you remember this guy. His name is Cy Sperling. He was the founder and president for the Hair Club of Men. Do y'all remember this guy? He used to run TV commercials back in the 1990s and early 2000s. And as you can tell, over in this picture on the left-hand side, we have him as a bald guy, and on the right-hand side, he has hair. And his big saying or tagline in his commercials was, "I'm not only the president, I'm also a client." Meaning, he believes in the product that he's selling. In the same way, I will tell you that as the Director of Stewardship Development, yes, I've been placed in a position of leadership in this area of stewardship, but I will tell you that I just don't talk the talk. I walk the walk. And in my own legacy documents, in my various life insurance policies, if I were to pass away today, I have made sure that my wife and my 3 daughters are taken care of financially in the event of my passing. But I will also tell you this, that I want to leave a legacy to my church, to this spiritual body here at First Baptist Raytown. If I were to pass away today, that the church will receive a gift slightly over $100,000. So it's something to think about. If you've never thought about this idea of legacy giving, I'd love for you to consider that. And making sure that the kingdom of God, the mission of First Baptist Church, continues on into the future. So, what's the key here in the devotional this morning is we all need to be proactive. We need to be proactive in leaving a legacy, just like President Carter. When he left office, yeah, he had a failed presidency, but did he just roll over and give up? Did he go on a 32-year vacation? No. he's been busy at work because he cares about this country, he cares about the world, and he wanted to leave his mark on the world. So I'd encourage you to do the same. You know, you might be saying here, Larry, well, I'm too old, it's too late for me. I'll tell you this, it's never too late. If you're still above ground and sucking wind, it's never too late to leave an amazing legacy of love. So how do we leave? Well, before we go into that, the best legacy building happens on purpose. We're being proactive in building our legacy. And how do we do that? We talked about 3 ways today. In what we say, the words we use. Secondly, in our actions, what we do. And finally, by what we give. Yeah.